Hello, everyone. Today I'd like to talk about the character of Larry Ott from Crooked Letter in terms of the ambiguity of belonging. Now, if you've seen the video I did on Tao and Sue from Gran Torino, you may remember that I talked about the ambiguity of their belonging in terms of cultural and ethnic identity. And while the aspect of ethnicity and culture also plays a role as far as Larry is concerned, the ambiguity of his belonging fundamentally works on the really basic level of personal belonging, of having friends or family that you can relate to on a personal level and where you can say, I belong with this person. And if you think back a couple of weeks, I asked you to, in an exam, to comment on the following quotation, and that encapsulates very nicely Larry's predicament as far as belonging is concerned. Let me just read it out to you. The harder we try to belong, the more difficult it turns out to be. And that's exactly the case as far as Larry is concerned. At various points, he tries very hard to belong, but for various reasons, which we'll talk about in a minute, he fails to do so. And what's interesting as far as Larry is concerned is not only his desire to belong, but also the fact that he really has all or most of the prerequisites that one would need in order to belong. Prerequisites, by the way, are Voraussetzungen in German. What are those prerequisites that Larry has? Well, first of all, he's white in a society where it's uh, not legally privileged anymore to be white, but where it's certainly not a disadvantage. He's growing up in a more or less intact family. He has a father and a mother. While they're not rich, they are, by the standards of the society in which Larry is growing up, fairly well off. They're doing fine in those terms. He's also an intelligent and a sensitive young man. So you might think he's got everything you need to be able to belong. The fact that he can't do so maybe has something to do with these two last qualities that I mentioned, his intelligence and his sensitivity, because while we would certainly see them as positive characteristics, he's growing up in a society, in a culture where they're not really privileged. So let me just give you a couple of examples of where Larry tries to belong but fails. There are more, so I'll just mention a couple of the most important. First of all, Larry's father. He isn't able to gain the love, the recognition of his father. Why not? Well, because he doesn't fit in with the manly expectations that his father has of him. And there we can look back to these qualities of sensitivity and intelligence. He's a young man who reads books. That's not really what his father wants of him. Then Silas, when they're young men, Silas is his friend on a certain level, but there's always something keeping them apart. Now, that has to do with ethnicity. Silas is black and Larry is white in a society where a friendship of that type is still something that's looked upon in negative terms. There's also a social divide. Silas is growing up with a single mother. He doesn't have a father, although it turns out, of course, that he has the same father as Larry, but we don't know that at the time, and they don't know it at the time. And he just doesn't have the money, the financial circumstances which Larry has, and all these things conspire to make their friendship impossible. Then there's the attempt at belonging to Cindy, his first girlfriend, his first date, which doesn't work out for the simple reason that she's not interested in him. She's interested in Silas and already going out with Silas. Another example would be Wallace, where some kind of friendship does develop, but of course it's not a real friendship because Wallace isn't a normal person. He's a murderer. We might say he's a psychopath. He's certainly not sane in any normal sense of the word. And by the way, while we're talking about Wallace, I won't make a video on Wallace in terms of the ambiguity of belonging. I don't think we can really relate him to that topic at all. Yes, he is someone who's looking for a friend. just like Larry is. But like I said, he's a murderer, he's a madman, and so we can't really discuss his character in terms of normal human motivations. At the end of the novel, we get the sense of at least a possible reconciliation with Silas. You remember the case of Cindy's murder has been solved. Larry has been exculpated, which means he's been proved innocent because Silas admitted to being the last person to have seen Cindy. This enables Larry to start moving to some extent away from this stereotype that he has in society of being a weirdo, of being scary Larry, of being a potential rapist and murderer. The fact that he and Silas are half brothers is out in the open. And so we sense that maybe there can be a reintegration of Larry into society and a restarting, a rekindling of his friendship with Silas. So maybe some kind of belonging is now going to be available to Larry. What's changed? Why is he suddenly able to belong? Well, there are all the things I've just mentioned. Circumstances have changed. But if we think back to the quotation I talked about at the beginning, the harder we try to belong, the more difficult it turns out to be. I get the sense at the end of the novel, just at the point where Larry has stopped really trying, where he's more or less given up, where he's lying in hospital, he's been shot, he's almost died. So he's given up on everything, and suddenly these opportunities open up for him to belong. So when he tries, the harder he tries, the more difficult it is. At the very moment where he stops trying so hard, where he's, like I said, given up, belonging is something that becomes possible. Let me just finish off by looking at a couple of words that we could use to describe Larry. Maybe this is useful to you in vocab terms. First word I'd like to look at is misfit. We could say Larry is a misfit. A misfit is somebody who doesn't fit in. There are also connotations in that word of somebody who's a bit strange. The word has negative connotations. You could also say he's a loner. Well, a loner is obviously someone who prefers to be alone. It's not a term that's as negative as a misfit, because the implication is very often a loner is someone who likes to be alone, who wants to be alone. We could certainly use the term outsider to refer to Larry. He's someone who doesn't fit in, who's outside of the norms of society, if you like. Then, of course, a word I'm sure you're aware of, lonely, the adjective lonely, einsam. And just be careful with the noun loneliness, because while lonely is spelled with a Y at the end, loneliness is spelled with an I in the middle, L-O-N-E-L-I-N-E-S-S. We could also maybe say he's an introvert. An introvert, well, the technical definition, I believe, of an introvert is someone who needs to be alone in order to build up his energy reserves, but is commonly used as someone who's a bit shy and not very open. Certainly, I think both those definitions fit quite well with Larry. Then there's the word a recluse. A recluse is a fairly extreme term. A recluse is someone who never goes outside, who's always on their own, who's always by themselves. It also has slightly negative connotations to it, but certainly Larry has something of the recluse. And he's an enforced recluse. Yeah? He would like to have friends and be a part of society, but he can't be. And finally, a word which I think is quite good and which I absolutely wouldn't use to describe Larry, that's a misanthrope. A misanthrope, M-I-S-A-N-T-H-R-O-P-E. A misanthrope is someone who dislikes other people. And that doesn't fit in with Larry, because he would like to be friends with other people. He's just not able to do so. Okay, I hope you found all that useful. You will have noticed here they are. The owls are back, our two friends. One of them Hedwig, but I still don't have a name for the other one. See you later. Bye.